and welcome everybody to our series of Let's Talk About the M Word. And today our topic is miscarriage. We are delighted to have Tiernan Moran, Selena Casey, and Lorraine Atchison as our panelists today. Thank you for agreeing to be our panelists as well. And maybe just over to yourselves to introduce and tell us why the topic of miscarriage is so important to you all. And maybe we'll start with you, Tiernan, and go to Selena and then to Lorraine.
No problem for that, and thank you so much for inviting me here today. Just to introduce myself, I'm Tiernan Moore, and I'm currently the Chief Operating Officer for Deloitte Northern Ireland. And for me, have, from a personal background, my wife and I have sadly experienced quite a number of miscarriages over the years, both early and late, and including a miscarriage. And I think I've been on a journey from our very first one through to our most recent. And I think it's such an important topic that is just not talked about, both personally and professionally in the workplace. And through, I suppose, my role in Deloitte, I've been able to work with leadership to help create, I suppose, a more inclusive, open culture about miscarriage. And I think whenever we experienced our very first miscarriage, it wasn't a thing you talked about. You didn't mention it. And we've been on a journey and over the years, and the position of the comp that Deloitte offer now is the experience of support that I receive has been sort of transformational, both for my wife and for me as well. So I think this topic is such an important one that we just have to talk about it, be open, that it's so common that there are just a number of small wee things that we can do as businesses and organizations that can really make a difference and support people that are going through this really emotional and tough time.
Tough time. Thank you, Tiernan, and you're absolutely right. We know from our members it is a topic that is a difficult topic, but it is a very important topic. So, Selena, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us why miscarriage is important to yourself?
Of course. So my name is Selena Casey. I am a psychotherapist specialised in working with miscarriage, baby loss and neonatal death. Like you say, Colette, it is very, very important that we have this conversation. One of the reasons why I am such an advocate for the parents that I represent is because in 2021, I experienced my first miscarriage, and at that point, I probably wasn't educated enough in what actually the extent and the pain that miscarriage causes, that I had already had two boys, and probably looking back was probably quite arrogant whenever I arrived at my appointment that day. So it was a booking appointment with the surgeon who was going to be doing my section, and we'd heard the words, "There's no heartbeat," and I was quite naive probably, and didn't understand that meant I would have to come in and deliver a baby. And nobody sees that trauma. Nobody, whenever we talk about miscarriage, and I certainly was one of those people where I would have thought, oh, that's really sad, but they'll be grand. They'll be okay. And only when it happened to me and my family did I realise, well, actually, there's very little support there for people. And in our experience, at that point, we left the hospital with a leaflet. And we then had two more miscarriages after that at an earlier stage. And those experiences were a different type of trauma. And so since that day, I suppose that we found out that Tori had died, I have worked every day towards setting up the White Butterfly Foundation. And the White Butterfly Foundation is a not-for-profit that our plan is to fully give free or donation-based psychological support for parents when they need it, because I feel there's a huge gap in Northern Ireland for that one-to-one support. What we have found since we have set up is that there's a massive relevance of peer support as well. So one of the things that we do in order to fund the free and psychological support is we host tile workshops, which we make tiles that are memorials for people's babies, and that you can have a naming tile, a Christmas tile, a Mother's Day tile, a Father's Day tile. And the conversations that are had in those workshops are incredible. The friendships that are forged in those workshops, unreal. Like I had done a workshop in Belfast a few months ago, and there was two ladies from two completely different communities, and they actually arrived at the launch in Stormont together and have been talking every day since. And that, for me, that's job done. That's phenomenal. Like those two girls have found support in each other. So yeah, that's why I find this topic something that we need to talk more about.
Thank you, Selena. And Lorraine, yourself, could you just introduce yourself and tell us why this topic of miscarriage is important to you?
Yeah, thanks, Colette. So I'm Lorraine Atchison. I'm Managing Director of Women in Business, and it was really important to me that we bring this topic for discussion today. And because, as I've said before, we are a business network, but we understand that people bring their whole selves to work, and it doesn't matter whether you are managing a team, if you're running your own business, if you're an employee, we all bring our whole selves, and that includes, very sadly, the experience of miscarriage. And we know that 1 in 8 pregnancies in Northern Ireland will end in miscarriage. We also know it can affect up to 1 in 4 women during their lifetime. And for me, I had a miscarriage, which was very unexpected in that I'd had 3 healthy children, perhaps a bit like Selena, very confident. I'd already that had the idea of that the next baby being round the dining table with us. And so it was really unexpected for me when I experienced a miscarriage. And I think, having gone through that, I was self-employed at the time, which brought its own set of unique circumstances too. And I know that many of our members are self-employed, as well as those who are working in the public, private and voluntary sectors. So I guess for me it's personal, but it's really also about looking at how we can bring to light these conversations and make people more comfortable talking about them, and also support employees and colleagues to support those facing miscarriage.
Thank you, Lorraine. And, thank you very much to the 3 of you who have the personal experience of miscarriage for sharing with us today, because it's really important. So, Selena, maybe for yourself, what are some of the common feelings that people experience after miscarriage?
So in the work that I do on a one-to-one basis, one of the biggest things that would come up in therapy sessions is feelings of invalidation. So almost like people sometimes feel that they don't have a right to grieve because they never got to see their baby, or they never got to hold their baby, or just for a variety of reasons. And sometimes they go for some sort of support afterwards and they can't get it, and therefore they feel that those feelings aren't valid. And why are they feeling this way? Why are they feeling this profound sadness? Another one, for a personal feeling that I had, was a complete shock. Like Lorraine had said, I just assumed everything was going to be okay. It wasn't even on my radar that things would not work out. And especially in the case of a miscarriage, which our first loss was, there's a real deep sense of shock, and that can be very, very hard to process. The disbelief behind what has just happened. There's an element as well, I think, in this miscarriage journey of isolation, because what happens is something that I found after we have a really, really good support network. And I found initially loads of flowers, loads of people wanting, people talk and they wanted to help you, but life goes on for other people, and so it should. And then, but for you, often whenever you and your partner experience this loss, you feel quite stuck at times, and everybody else seems to be moving on, and that can be very isolating. So I suppose isolation, anxiety, fear of future pregnancies is a very, very big one that I would work with. And that's all the mental side of things. There's also the physical element of of losing a baby and what it does to your body. And like Lorraine says, a lot of the women who be listening to this may well be self-employed and may have to have no option but go back to work. And that's what I know we'll talk about it later on, but that's where self-care really comes in.
Yeah, and you know, I've just honed in on, you know, not allowed to grieve, that line that you just said there. That's very heartbreaking, you know, because it is a grief process as well.
It really is, yeah.
Lorraine, for yourself, what were the common feelings that you would have experienced?
Yeah, I mean, very much as what Selena says. I think the validation was something for me, which was perhaps the biggest thing, because I did have 3 healthy children. There was a feeling that, well, sure, you've got 3, and so I felt very kind of obviously privileged to have 3 healthy children, but I felt kind of guilty being sad of this one that you know, I'd lost. So that was unexpected too, to feel that you know, I should just get on with it really, because you've got 3 and that's enough. So it's really unexpected as well, and there's a grief and loss there, as with all grief and loss, that, you know, is very personal. But I did feel it was something quite private, and I felt kind of very self-conscious about feeling sad. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I suppose it is that, you know, where you touched on there, you've got 3 children, you know, just move on. You know, that's probably quite common, Lorraine.
That is very, very common, Colette. Sorry for jumping in there, but it's something that the clients that I work with would say, you know, especially people who haven't or that have living children, it's almost this just be happy with your lot, kind of just, you know, and the reality is that the minute that we find out, the minute a couple finds out they're pregnant, your mind's already thinking about prams, how the house is going to look, what next Christmas is going to look like, what you're buying, what do you need to change your car. All those things are already on your radar, and you're planning every single day of that pregnancy, and that's just wiped completely away. And that is very, very difficult to hear whenever somebody who, with all the best intentions, is trying to help you move on or trying to help you to process your grief. It's not helpful whenever you hear things like that.
Yeah, and I suppose this is the education piece that hopefully we can share today on how to support our colleagues, our friends, our families that are going through this. So maybe staying with yourself, Selena, how can parents effectively communicate their needs and emotions to colleagues or managers without feeling that vulnerability or feeling judged?
Yeah, I think there probably will be an element of vulnerability whenever you have to share this news with anyone. I know at the time, like my background's in workplace mental health, and I know my boss was absolutely phenomenal whenever we'd lost Tori. And I think it's important for the parent to be honest about how they're feeling. I think, especially in this country, we're very good at masking and trying to belittle their feelings a wee bit, but be honest. But I suppose be selective as well. Only share what you're comfortable sharing. And don't feel that you have to go into every single detail. And I think workplaces are definitely stepping up, and it's amazing to see Tiernan here from Deloitte. Workplaces are definitely seeming to be taking on board the trauma often associated with miscarriage. But it would be lovely to see more workplaces coming on board with that. And I think having a clear policy in place would maybe take away the need for parents to have to come forward and share absolutely everything. But I suppose in the event that you do have to have that conversation and share what has been happening, using good, clear language and being direct about what you would like to see happening. So, for example, I'm currently trying to process this loss. Is there any flexibility that you can show me while I heal, in a way, you know, and just being open and sharing how you're feeling, because I know what often happens is, for whatever reason, and it's maybe to do with the stigma of miscarriage, parents don't disclose and maybe don't take time off work, and that's where it becomes complicated for that parent to process their own grief.
Yeah, and you know, we touched on how colleagues can support, but that feeling of vulnerability, and being judged is real.
Yeah, it is real, and it happens very often. And even in my line of work, I mean, I've been doing this day in, day out. It's consumed a lot of my life over the past 4 years. But even now, whenever I talk about miscarriage, I sometimes think, are people trying to suss out what stage I was at? When did it happen? Or how did it happen? And that is the reality. Sometimes we like to, there's absolutely no hierarchy in grief, but sometimes people don't give miscarriage the place that it needs because of the pain and the trauma. Like I always say, people don't see you being transferred from maternity to gynae. They don't see you having to walk down that gynae corridor. You don't see you having to break the news to your other children. They don't see you having to deliver the baby. They just hear you've had a miscarriage and that's really sad, but should be grand. Like, and that was my, like I say, that was my view. But there can be a lot of trauma involved
in it. And I suppose that leads us lovely into yourself, Tiernan. You know, how can organisations support with that grieving process associated with miscarriage? And
Yeah,
do you have the
absolutely.
experience of that in
Yeah, absolutely. And I say, I've had the experience of, being at the very start of that journey where, miscarriage wasn't even talked about or mentioned or didn't even exist in any policy. And I think what we've talked about is, it's just about acknowledging openly, that, what miscarriage is. I think, it all comes down to creating that supportive, inclusive culture where miscarriage is not a hush, not talked about topic, but something that can be openly talked about with empathy and understanding. And, just looking at, your organization, is it something you do talk about in your newsletters? Uh, is it mentioned in your policies, as leaders, or do your leaders openly, do they openly talk about, this is real, it happens, we're here for you. So I think that's where it all starts. How, building those blocks of creating a supportive culture. And I think from that acknowledging it openly, I think then you can begin to build the foundations of support, and that can take many forms, like, it could be support group, a Teams channel, or just a shared understanding between colleagues. And I think for me, as my wife and I have come across, or have went through our journey, I think, the power of storytelling has been so important, because I think it's only through stories and hearing experiences that you begin to chip away at that wall of silence, and begin, to open up that, it might be a wee bit easier for the next person to raise their hand, or say, listen, I've just experienced a miscarriage, I need some support. So, we've talked about, vulnerability here, and I think, it's about creating that culture where vulnerability is met with compassion. And, wherever, Lorraine, you mentioned about bringing your whole self to work. It's about creating a workplace where everyone's seen, heard, and supported. No matter what they're going through, miscarriage might be one thing, but I think, that is the importance of creating that inclusive culture, that your teams can reach out no matter what they're going through. So yes, for me, I think, start with community storytelling, and then just listen to your people. It is a journey. You're not going to fix or implement something just overnight. It's just about building that step by step, and continuing just to listen to your people, and lead from the front, and openly talk about it.
Yeah. And Tiernan, what workplace policies could be put in place or are in place for a corporate employee, and Lorraine, I'll move on to you on the self-employed, potentially, like time off or flexible working. And I know that's something that you have within Deloitte. So maybe if you could share some of those policies and
Yeah,
adjustments?
absolutely. And time off and flexibility is so important because I think, that having that time to heal both sort of physically and emotionally is so crucial. But I think, what's also important is recognizing that everyone copes differently. One person might need flexible hours, another might need phased return, and some people just want space to talk to someone. For me, whenever I was going through when me and my partner were going through our miscarriages, some days I was fine, got back to work, and then others just felt impossible. And we talked about, dates, with iPhones and apps now, as soon as you find out you're pregnant, you put in the date and it tells you what size your baby is each week. And you know your due date. So those dates are always in your mind. And when after we experienced our first miscarriage, I went back into the organization and or into Deloitte and started to work with our leaders and our diversity and inclusion networks. And I'm really proud that we did bring in our pregnancy baby loss policy. And that policy, it's 2 weeks paid leave, but you can take that up to 56 weeks after your loss.
That's
Because
really
as
important.
Selena said, grief doesn't have a timeline. And whenever things like you experience your next period or your due date or a birthday or Christmas, you need time at different points. So yeah, policies and time off, yes, is absolutely important. But as I said before in my previous answer about the importance of that inclusive culture.
Yeah,
And
being
look
able
at,
to talk
you
about
can
it.
be able to talk about it, have leaders that set the tone from the important from the top as well. And also look, what is your entire not offer but support for your people. Private, some organizations offer private medical insurance, counseling services, even mental health champions as well. So there are small things that contribute to just creating that inclusive culture that are really helpful to people, not just going through miscarriages, but other, I suppose, life challenges as well. And as I said, it's a journey. Deloitte, we are still on that journey as well, and we're continuing to listen to our people, and it's about everyone's experience is different, and personal to them, and we just need to continue to listen to see how we can best support our people. And I think that's where, equipping leaders with not with the tools or the knowledge, because you don't have to have all the answers. You just need, as a leader, I think it's so important to just be there and listen. And I think that's quite a lot of times that's what people want. But for us, we've created bereavement training as well for leaders to how to have those conversations, signposting to other resources, um, and then it's just about that culture and tone from the top. And
Yeah.
for us internally, we do talk about it. Our leader, we talk about it on webinars, we talk about it in newsletters. We recognize, in October there was Baby Loss Awareness Week, and we lit up our headquarters in blue and pink to acknowledge that. And for me, that was one of the projects that I worked on. How proud that the head, a skyscraper in London was blue and white for the entire week, acknowledging. And we got people reaching out, walking past our offices to say, I noticed you lit up blue and pink for that. So as I say, they're just small wee things, but the
And
importance is talk about it.
and thank you, Tiernan. And it does seem like Deloitte have amazing policies in place. I think it's something I've honed in on there. What you said, a 2 week leave over 52 weeks is really important, because the date element, as you say, won't necessarily follow in those 2 weeks. So maybe, you know, that date's being off within the first 52 weeks is really important. But Lorraine,
Colette, I would just say I've got policies for both parents going through miscarriage as well,
yeah,
which I think is so
really
important.
important.
It's so important as well.
Yeah. And Lorraine, you touched on it earlier. A lot of our members are self-employed, so and isolated. You know, we do hear that word from our self-employed members. You know, when you're working on your own business and you're how can they support themselves or get support when they're going through this? Because flexible working is probably something they have to do themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. It's quite a different scenario. There's lots of freedoms being self-employed. A lot of women go into self-employment to be able to pursue their business goals and to set up businesses that will support themselves and their families and grow. But they tend not to have those supportive structures in place that Tiernan just described. And certainly for me, when I experienced my miscarriage, I was a self-employed consultant, so working for a number of different clients. And whilst you can take statutory sick leave, actually when you're juggling clients and deadlines, the work will just be there when you've taken time off. So, you know, I think there's something about how we look after ourselves in those moments when there perhaps isn't the wider support that you might get if you're employed in the private sector or in the public sector. And I think it's about looking to your own networks for support, be that your family network. But actually, for networks like Women in Business, it's really important, I believe, for women who work for themselves to join a network like ours to get that support from other women, because needless to say, others have gone through it. Our network is there, obviously, for people to talk about business growth and how to raise money and how to get clients and marketing. But actually, it's also about how are you coping yourself. And so I think for me, it was about looking within my own support network. There's obviously charities available to like Selena's charity, and it's looking about what other sources of support can you seek when you haven't got the luxury of paid time off work, or you've still got to deliver your deadlines. There is a degree, sadly, of having to just get on with it. And so, but how can we do that in a way that is kind to ourselves and doesn't kind of squash those feelings down? And that's hard, actually, because, you know, I think sometimes you do have to then rock up to a presentation the following day, whether you feel like it or not. So I don't think there's an easy answer, sadly.
Yeah.
But what I do know is that there are lots of support networks out there, and sometimes it's about acknowledging your own grief and asking for help and looking at the resources that are available.
Yeah, and as you rightly point out, you know, we have recorded this session, and hopefully our members will see this as a support and that they can go back and refer to if they need it. And Selena, just on the support, you know, what are some of the resources or support systems that, you know, from your experience, people can access through workplaces or externally at the time of miscarriage?
So as Tiernan had mentioned earlier, there's a lot, like larger organisations will have employee assistance programs in place where people can avail of one-to-one counselling. Maybe occupational health can help in some way, or signpost to the right places. What I would say is it appears in this community that a lot of the support does come down to the charities, and I suppose it's the reason I set up the White Butterfly Foundation, because there just isn't the one-to-one support out there. And I suppose I would like to extend that offer to Lorraine and everybody in Women in Business. Like if you are in a situation where you're having to just get on with it, 1 hour a week can sometimes be all you need to just help you process what's going on in your head, try to get a plan in place for the following week. And that's what I find with the self-employed people that I work with. It's like, you know, sometimes they can come into a session and there's just so much going on. They haven't even had time. Like, so basically what happens is their loss, their trauma is put into a box and they've just had to get on with work. But that box will open at some point. So I would always say, like, it's best to try and filter out an hour at some point during the week if you can for that one-to-one support. I think personally it wasn't ever really in my plan, but I feel that peer support is massive in this environment, in this community. Like I said earlier, like we do the tile workshops, and they are phenomenal. And being able to walk into a room and either tell your story or not tell your story, it means an awful lot for a parent who has potentially, and I'm sure you guys will understand what I mean, where you want to talk about what has happened, and you're often met with a glaze because people are terrified because they don't know what to say to you, or else they just don't feel that it's high enough up the priority. They don't know how to respond, or they think you just get on with it, you know. Whereas if you walk into a room of parents who have experienced this in the past, they know, they get how you're feeling. You don't have to explain any of that. You just go and you can just be yourself. So that I think is phenomenal. I think it's important that HR professionals are trained to an extent in miscarriage and understand the traumas that go with it. And I think, like, what I would love to see in the next 5 years, I'm going to say, is where we do have mental health first aiders, that maybe we have one person in the organisation that would be your person, that if a member of your team has experienced a miscarriage, that, you know, this person's okay to talk to, they might get you. And it would be lovely to see that in the workplace. It would be lovely to have somebody with lived experience that's maybe further on down their journey. Like, what I would say is, I am very much like, with miscarriage comes another journey, whether you want to think about it or not. So you either become somebody who's trying to conceive again, you become somebody who's made a decision that they're not going to have any more children, which is a very difficult decision to get your head around, or you're pregnant after loss. So there's a whole journey that happens after you have a miscarriage. And I think being held or having somebody who understands that journey, it is so important, that in the workplace, outside of work, like Tiernan mentioned earlier, vulnerability being met with compassion. I love that actual line. And that's where, what I would love to see happening is like a workplace, something in place where somebody with lived experience on down the line can support somebody who's maybe just went through it. Like our theme for our 2 launches in the Guildhall and in Stormont was hope. And everything about those launch events was aimed at people who have just experienced loss, but the people who spoke were further on down their journey. And the feedback I have got from those launch events is like, do you know what? I know that every day is not going to be really tough. I know that these ladies are on down the line. These gentlemen have processed what has happened, and I know that they're okay. So I'll be okay. I might be having a few really, really dark days, but I will be okay. And I think if we could implement that into the workplace somehow, it would be phenomenal.
Yeah, and you know, leading on and what the White Butterfly Foundation do and the tile. I remember speaking to Selena, and you'd mentioned that sense of leaving a hospital with nothing, and knowing that tile now is something that you'll have for your wall or for your desk, or, you know, that's
yeah. And you know, with it, like I say, and obviously I'm quite biased, but it's not just the tile, it's the experience of making the tile, and it's the people that you met while you were making it. And even how, like I always say to the parents I work with, believe it or not, even though they're feeling pretty low shortly after they've lost, they'll want to go back and revisit that stage in their life at some point to try and remember. And even just having that visual, like I know whenever we lost Tori, I had this like innate need that I needed something tangible in my house.
Yeah.
Now it went on to be a Terry Bradley painting that cost me an absolute fortune, but I love it. It's my most treasured thing in the house. But I do think that sometimes we need something quite personal to us after we've been lost, because like you say, we leave the hospital with a leaflet at best.
Yeah. And I suppose that leads us nicely into, you know, what self-care practices or strategies have you found helpful, Selena, navigating both physically and emotionally recovery from miscarriage?
And you know, that word itself, Colette, is really important, because that validates what the process is after you've lost, because we don't always fully see that we do need to recover, I don't think, because we don't fully get that. And I think recovery has to be really gentle and taken at your pace. And something that I find with the parents that I work with is some parents will look and say, oh, that girl had a miscarriage 3 months ago and she's fine. Why do I feel this way? And it's really not a competition. And there's, like we said earlier, there's no timeline with this. We have to be really gentle with ourselves and we have to be patient with ourselves. For me, what happened after we'd lost Tori was I really felt like I needed to be pregnant again straight away. I didn't want to wait. I wanted to be pregnant 3 months ago, like 3 weeks ago. And that in itself is really frustrating for a parent. I think it's frustrating for the other partner, because they're watching. Like, I know my husband watched me going through this stage, and I probably wasn't myself at all. I think emotional practices are really, really important as well. Things like journaling. Like, one of the things I did as soon as I found out, and I'm not a natural journaler, one of the things I did once we found out we'd lost Tori was I went to Asda and bought a journal. Now, that started out being really lovely and everything that was in my head, and it turned out being, this person said this, and it's really annoyed me. And it's really interesting going back, because if that was said to me now, I would understand why it was said. At that time, it was literally like a knife through my heart whenever people like, and it was just the stage that I was at in my grief. And I think something we're very, very guilty of in the baby loss community is thinking ahead. So I need to be pregnant by Christmas, or I need to like do this, or like where am I at? You see, staying in the moment is so important. Mindfulness is so important. And however that should come about, whether it's through meditation or, I don't know, yoga, whatever, we need to stay in the moment and try and catch the thoughts that we're constantly snowballing, I suppose, because whenever they snowball and we don't take time with them, that's whenever serious mental health conditions can set in. And I suppose another thing for me was memory making. It's what a thing in the counselling world that we call continuing bonds. So keeping that bond between you and your baby, and this might be something that's completely private to you, like something I do is every year I order a Harrods teddy bear, and there's no big deal made about it. Like, it's at Christmas every year, I wrap it up, Christmas morning I'll open it, nobody really notices, and that's just my thing. That's what I do. That's how I acknowledge Tori. Or it could be planting a tree, or it could be doing a tile, something that's keeping that continuing bond. And the other thing that's probably really, really important is setting boundaries. If you don't feel like going to the baby shower that you're invited to, don't go to the baby shower. If you don't want to see certain birth announcements on Instagram, on Facebook, set your settings differently on your social media. Those boundaries are really important, and those people that are closest to you will understand. I think that's really important. I think that's probably the biggest one for people to get through this.
Those are really fantastic self-care tips to help go through the journey on miscarriage. And Lorraine, as your work colleague, how do work colleagues and families and your peers support? A lot of people fear what to say and say the wrong thing. So what are your experiences of how work colleagues and family and friends can support you through this period?
I mean, I guess I think the key thing for me is what we've talked about earlier is about validation, and even just to recognize it, and even if you don't know what to say. And I think it's similar perhaps in any situation of grief, to be able to say, I'm so sorry, and actually I don't, and you might even say, and I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
I think the other thing we were reflecting on when we had our kind of briefing call around this was, I think sometimes we say in a very well-meaning way, let me know what I can do to help. My experience is I have no idea what you can do. I don't even know what I can do for myself, let alone what you could do. And what I've learned, because also my eldest son, he was born prematurely at 33 weeks, which is a very big shock. And the most helpful thing people did was they turned up at our front door with lasagnas or whatever, because we couldn't cook, because we couldn't think.
Yeah.
And we had him in Australia and we didn't have family there, and all of that. And so actually it's made me reflect, because it's easy to say, let me know how I can help. It just comes out, and it's well-meaning. But I wonder, turning up at someone's door with no expectation and a lasagna or whatever it is, and validating it. I think it's simple. I don't think we have to do anything much more than that. And I think it's something that is in all our capabilities.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that that's great advice will help everybody that's joined us today. Sometimes it is just saying, I really don't know what to say. Because in most of these circumstances, people don't, because it's such a personal experience. But as you say, actions speak louder than words sometimes, Lorraine. And Tiernan, then what advice would you give to managers and team leaders on how to better support their colleagues through this journey? We've spoke briefly there about how it is difficult to acknowledge, but what can leaders and managers do better?
Yeah, and we've talked and talked about quite a lot, I suppose, on this. And for me, it's coming back to just that openness and leading with empathy. I think as leaders or as team members, to be that person that your colleagues feel comfortable coming to you and feel safe is so important. And as Selena and Lorraine said, is you don't have to know all the answers or know what to say, but just knowing that you have someone that you can go to, really makes all the difference. And I would say, if you are only slowly, if starting out on that journey, if, I suppose, creating a culture, it takes time, it takes effort, it takes intention, but that impact that it can have on your colleagues is immeasurable. So, by creating that, I suppose, open culture, those conversations, we begin to normalize it and break down the stigma, which, I suppose that's the intention around behind the M series as well, and the three topics that you've covered today. So, absolutely, organizations that have access to these resources, please promote those internally and even externally as well. And I think, I really resonate with quite a lot with, well, everything that Lorraine and Selena said in terms of, definitely, had many lasagnas delivered to our house. But I think for me, one of the most important things that you can understand is that everyone grieves differently, okay? And there's no right or wrong way and no set timeline. Because I think for me, when in my experiences, as my wife was experiencing the physical symptoms of miscarriage, and I very much went into protection mode. I need to look after her, whatever she wants. And I didn't deal with my own feelings, because I was just like, I need to support her and whatever what I can do for her. And it wasn't until quite a long afterwards that, when we got back to work, that I was like, I haven't processed my feelings and my experiences. So I think, having that openness and knowledge that, it can take a long time, and what might seem a long time for the leader or your leaders or as leaders, it could feel like yesterday for the people that are going or that have went through it. So, just always remember that. And I think that's why, obviously, our policy is 56 weeks after your loss. Because, as Faye says, you don't get over it. You always remember it, and yeah.
And Tiernan, I think it's so important in this discussion to have the male perspective as well, because, and thank you for sharing with us today, because yes, physically it is something a lady goes through, but this is very much a partner's grief.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we really are appreciative that you can tell it from that perspective as well. And I'm sure it resonates with everybody that's here, that you did go into protective mode because that's what felt right to protect your wife, but then you had to deal with your own grief as well. So thank you for sharing that. Um, we're going to wrap up soon, but just for everybody, and maybe we'll stay with you, Tiernan, if that's okay. How can sharing personal stories or experience of miscarriage reduce the stigma? And we're hoping even the likes of our webinar today can help with that. But
Yeah. Absolutely, and we've talked about the powers of storytelling and hearing someone's story, and I think as we share experiences, you just begin to shine a light on something that is just often hidden and not talked about. And I suppose as humans, when we hear stories, it's a voice, it's a person, and we realize that we're not alone, and that realization and what Selena talked about is about the peer support. It's incredibly comforting, not just for the person hearing the story, but I think sometimes actually for the person telling the story, and how it can create just that ripple effect. That one person to bravely stand up and tell their story can begin to create that environment. And we talked about the bravery to be vulnerable, and how that can just begin to change the tide. So yeah, I just think storytelling is definitely so important to start with.
yeah,
And I suppose I suppose as a male as well, just the importance of telling I suppose my story as well can create an environment where leaders are comfortable and open to share their experiences as well.
for sure. And Selena, for yourself, the importance of
I think it's so important for us. Like I would say a lot of, even for this generation that are going through those things, we need to open the door for the generations coming through. Like the reason there's so much stigma around miscarriage is because nobody wanted to listen to the older generation. Nobody wanted to know whenever somebody had experienced a loss previously. And now I think there's a bit of a ripple effect where if one person starts talking, someone else will start talking. And there's a terminology that we use in the miscarriage and baby loss community, a terminology called ugly feelings. And it's where you sometimes, like maybe your sister-in-law or your sister gets pregnant and you're really happy for them, but you're really sad for yourself. And if you're generally a very happy, nice person, that can be quite shocking. And opening a conversation with somebody else who says, well, actually, do you know what? I hated it when my sister was pregnant. And knowing that everybody kind of feels that way from at some point can be so helpful, and can really help you to feel more normal, rather than thinking, why am I turning into this bitter person? Whenever that in itself, those feelings, those thoughts are just part of your grieving process.
and thank you, Selena, you're absolutely right. And Lorraine, just for yourself, talking, how do we lose the stigma around baby loss and miscarriage?
I think it's doing exactly what we're doing today, Colette, which is about sharing our personal experiences, giving people suggestions and signposting to where they can get support and help, be it how you can provide support in your organisation through the policies and the range of things on offer in companies like Deloitte, or through accessing support services like Selena's. It's about normalising this conversation to realise that the difficulty and the grief that people go through, but importantly that no one is alone in this journey. And I think the more people talk about it, the more we can share and hopefully get the support we need. So I guess the final words I'd like to say today is about, if this has resonated with anyone listening, for them to share it with others, to share the great work that Deloitte's doing, to look up what Selena's foundation is doing, and I think through all those steps, we will help to break down the stigma.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Selena, Tiernan, and Lorraine, for sharing the experiences today on miscarriage. We have recorded this session. It is available to our members, and if the members that are joining us today have any questions, you can reach out. We will follow up with links to the White Butterfly Foundation and links for support from employers as well. So again, thank you. I know it's painful and that doesn't get any easier, but hopefully, sharing the experiences today will help others.
Thank you, Claire.
So have a lovely day.